here today. We're very pleased that you are able to cover this particular piece of very important legislation. Representative Jason Nemes and myself have filed House Bill 136 to address an issue which has too long been neglected in the Commonwealth of Kentucky. So how we're going to proceed is I'll say a few words about the bill and then turn it over to Representative Nemes, who will say a few words about the bill, and our two primary co-sponsors, Representative John Sims and Representative Mark Hart, as well. And if Senator Syme, who is standing behind me, would like to say a few words, and Representative Donahue, that would be fine as well. We're keeping our comments to a minimum and not getting into a lot of the details of the bill because we are sure that you have a lot of questions, which we'll be very happy to answer after that particular portion. So, starting with that, why this particular bill, Representative Nemes and I strongly support the more than somewhere between 40 and 60,000 Kentuckians who have faced daily face pain, excruciating pain in some cases, a quality of life which is considerably diminished, and have not been able to have that remedied by traditional medicine. So we believe firmly in medicinal marijuana and the attributes and the pain relief that will be provided under a very stringent law that has a lot of regulatory framework, licensing requirements. We've got a CASPR type system for doctors who would be recommending on their own volition a particular patient where they have a bona fide relationship with that patient to a dispensary. Law enforcement is notified of those card-carrying folks who would have had to apply for a medical marijuana card. And there are many more details, but we will do that in the question and answer. 40 to 60,000 of Kentuckians who every day wake up in pain, who may have 30 plus different medications that they have to purchase, they have to take, the medications interact with themselves, and these folks, if you can call it living, are in a situation that has rendered them feeling very left out of legislation in the Commonwealth, and their particular health issues not being considered. 32 other states have taken the step forward, 33 now, have taken the step forward to legalize medicinal marijuana. They have listened to their constituents, and Representative Nemes, Representative Sims, Representative Hart, and my primary co-sponsor with me, Representative Nemes, strongly believe in this being allowed for our Commonwealth citizens. So I will turn this over to Representative Nemes now.
Thank you, Diane. Today's a good day. We're filing House Bill 136 today. It's been a number of years in the making. A lot of people have got us to this point. A lot of advocates outside the General Assembly. I want to recognize one. That's Eric Crawford. Eric and his wife Michelle have been the number one advocates on this bill for a long time, educating members of the General Assembly and also the public. And we're not here today filing this bill without them. I also want to recognize two of my colleagues. There's a number of them. Representative John Sims and Representative Mark Hart were pushing me, elbowing me the whole time in the last 2 years to get to where I am. A lot of people know I was not for medical marijuana when I ran for office. And then I met with some folks, some constituents in my district, and was educated on the matter and have changed my position and now am full throttle in support of medical marijuana. House Bill 136, what is it? House Bill 136 is a trust your doctor bill. It's a trust the doctor bill. Legislators ought not be involved in the relationship between the doctor and the patient with respect to whether or not medical marijuana is an option. This is something that the overwhelming majority of citizens in the United States live under. They live under the freedom that House Bill 136 will bring to Kentuckians. 33 states already have it. And a majority of Kentuckians, a strong majority of Kentuckians, want it as well. And I'm going to go ahead and say I'm quite confident that a majority of House members support it as well. If we get a vote, the numbers will be above 60. This is a strong majority of Kentuckians, a strong majority of House members support medical marijuana, bringing medical marijuana. And why? The reason they do is because the science and clinical studies are clear, and they say the same thing. What they say is medical marijuana as an option is a good thing. It helps for a number of conditions. We talked about pain. There's also for cancer treatment, for nausea, for appetite, for a whole host of conditions that a doctor might think that their individual patient might benefit from. And so let's let the doctor decide. Let me use one example, if I might, because it brings it home, I think, to Kentucky. One of our biggest problems in Kentucky is the opioid problem that we have. It's destroying our communities. It's destroying our families in Kentucky. Opioid dependence, opioid overuse leads to heroin overuse as well, which is also a significant problem that we have in Kentucky. Well, what we found, what the studies show, including a study from the University of Kentucky professor less than 2 months ago that was published in JAMA, the Journal of American Medical Association, is that states that have medical marijuana, the addiction rate and the overdose rate plummet. But this is more important. Hear me here. Not only do the addiction rate and overdose rate plummet, the prescription rates go down substantially. When doctors have the option of giving their patients medical marijuana, they give that option to their patients, and the patient, the Kentuckian, is helped. And so that's why the overwhelming of Kentuckians support it, and that's why I believe it will pass the House of Representatives and hopefully the Senate in this session. I think Representative Sims has some words that he would like to say, and will answer any questions. But the bottom line is, if you take away one thing from this, it is that House Bill 136 is a bill that trusts the doctor to make the decision on what's best for their patient. Thank you.
Thanks, Jason. Good morning, everyone. Thanks for coming here today. I've been working on the medical marijuana bill for about 2 years now, and smart enough to know when to get out of the way and to pass the ball on. So thank Representative Nemes, Representative St. Albans, and everyone else that's been helped making this bill a better bill along the way with that. And thank them.
I just like to, our efforts and our goal with this bill is to bring or put another tool in the hands of our medical community to treat patients for a variety of needs. But I also want to emphasize too, this is not a step in the direction for recreational marijuana. This bill is strictly and only to provide another resource for our doctors to treat our Kentuckian citizens with a drug and a natural herb that could possibly help our community. So I just wanted to make that emphasis. Thank you.
Representative Donahue?
Okay, thank you. Good morning. Just want to thank my fellow colleagues for giving me the opportunity to come here and speak, and I want to be a small part of what's going on. Today is a good day, as Representative Nemes said. What we're trying to do today, and I'm, like I said, being a small part of it, it's a right thing to do, but it's a humanitarian thing to do. So we're here for the people in the state of Kentucky. I'm here to support my colleagues that have stepped up and stepped forward to make this become a reality, and hopefully we can do well on the floor. But let's do this. Today's a good day, but let's make this a great day, and let's get this bill passed. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm Senator Syme, and I'm here obviously in support of medical marijuana. I do want to mention Shannon Stacy's here working with me, and she will be very active on the medical marijuana side of the thing. Shannon and her husband, Dr. Stacy, are advocates of the bill. Dr. Stacy's went around the state on several occasions, along with his wife, Shannon. Shannon, by the way, is an oncologist nurse, and they have went around the states basically saying, give me this tool, give me this tool. I come from a personal base as a cancer survivor. For those that don't know, I had colon cancer 7 years ago. And when I left the hospital, they gave me that nice bottle of Oxycontin. I threw it in the garbage can and went home and smoked a joint. Okay? And guess what? No nausea. Was able to function while we was going through the treatment. It was during the legislative session, did not miss a day due to nausea of a cancer. I have a granddaughter who's epileptic. She works, she's got a full-time job, but she partakes. Wouldn't it be nice if my granddaughter was no longer a criminal? Wouldn't that be nice? Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Syme. And just to be clear, House Bill 136 stands on its own, is different from previous bills, and that is what we are discussing here, which is solely medicinal marijuana under a very stringent framework. So now we will open it up to questions and answers, hopefully the answers to the questions. So who would like to start?
The big question is, and you have bipartisan support on this, you don't have it in the Senate. The Senate president has spoken against supporting this. He's even questioned the carcinogens and it questions some of the studies. What is the chance that you get this through the House and you don't get this through the Senate?
We have bipartisan support in the Senate. Senator West has filed this bill last year, or similar iteration of this bill last year, and he's going to do the same this year once we pass it out of the House. A number of other Republicans also support it. The Senate president did not say he was, in my view, didn't say he was opposed to the bill. He said he needed to see some science that would move him in the direction of supporting the bill. We have the science. We've delivered that to Senator Stivers' office and other leaders as well. And we believe that once Senator Stivers looks at the science, he will agree with our position. I'm heartened by the fact that 2 years ago, when I ran for office the first time, I didn't support medical marijuana. But when I met with constituents and looked at them in the eye, and I was telling them the reasons why, one of them leaned forward and said, "Jason, listen to me." And she told me what it meant for her family. She told me what it meant for her child. We went around the room, and I thought to myself, you know, these people aren't liars, so maybe I should look into it. So I looked into it some more, talked to a lot of doctors, read a ton of studies, and reached the position that I have reached, and the position that I think Senator Stivers will reach as well when he reviews the study. So I'm confident that it will pass the House, and I believe that once we have the opportunity to be heard in the Senate, that it will pick up more and more support. Look, the train started a number of years ago, and the train is here now, and it's ready to go, and I believe we have a really good shot of passing it this particular year. I know for a fact we have the majority of votes in the House of Representatives.
And let's not forget that we have, it's projected over 80%, maybe 82% of Kentuckians are in favor of medicinal marijuana.
In your bill, what form could people take the marijuana and how would they get access to it once their doctor decided they needed it?
So there's a whole structure that we have set up for this, and either one of us can answer this. Do you want to just discuss the four different businesses and licensing?
So what this bill does is it creates an industry, because we don't have it in Kentucky. You have the grower, which is the farmer. You have the processor, which takes the raw material and puts it into the end result, and that's your question. I'll get to that in a second. And then you have also the dispensary, which is where people will go to buy the product. We also have, and one group can have one or two or all three of those licenses that are required there. We also have a safety component that is put into the mix, and it cannot have the same ownership. And the purpose there is to make sure that the products that Kentuckians will be consuming are safe. And so what is the means by which someone might obtain the product or use the product? They can use it in a salve, they can use it in a tincture, they can use it in oils. There's a lot of different ways edibles, they can use it in a lot of different ways. And again, the major point here is no one gets access to it under House Bill 136 unless they have the recommendation from their doctor.
You can smoke it.
You cannot smoke it in public in this bill. No, sir. There's no smoking in public or public accommodations.
Well, not public, but private, like Senator Simon mentioned in his instance with the colon cancer.
The bill.
If you're in your own private home.
Right, John. The bill doesn't address whether or not you smoke it in your own private home. Okay. What the bill does is it says there will be no smoking in public. We're not interested in having people smoking it on the streets. If the doctor believes that the full flower effect is what's appropriate, then that's not for a legislator to get in the middle of.
Your doctor's
Yes, ma'am.
able to say you get edibles, you get CBD oil, or you get everything then?
No, the doctor will say that marijuana is something that's helpful for this patient. They will have the communication, that confidential communication that I have with my doctor and that every Kentuckian has with their doctor, and that part of the conversation I'm sure will come up. That's up to the doctor to advise their patient on. When they make the recommendation, however, the recommendation will be that they should be able to have medical marijuana. Then they go to the dispensary for the purchase.
This bill doesn't have
Lawrence, he was next. Brian.
A couple of quick questions. One, talk about how this is going to be regulated. And second, I know one version of the bill said you could grow your own. Is that still in the bill?
So this will be housed under the Public Protection Cabinet, under the alcohol beverage control. We have left some of the specifics as to the regulations, Lawrence, to their writing. They will be the ones who will be deciding on that. As far as the home grow is in this bill. It allows for 6 mature plants and 6 seedlings. In order to be able to home grow, you would have to, in your application process for your card, you would have to also indicate that you wish to do that. We have the purpose for the home grow is because of the rural nature of Kentucky. The majority of Kentucky is considered rural. So these folks often are from impoverished areas. And this allows for them to be able to treat their symptoms, whatever they might be, if a doctor has said that this would work for them, by home grow. But they have to follow through. They have to, one requests that they have to meet some poverty guidelines for that. It has to be approved. It will be on the card that person who has applied to use medical marijuana. It will state on the card that that particular person also is allowed to home grow. Law enforcement will know who is has the capacity for home grow. So that if there are, because we want to work with our law enforcement, if there are situations that arise, unusual situations, and all of a sudden a particular house is having 40 vehicles visiting them that day or that evening, that might be a probable cause situation to look into that further. We've also, speaking of home grow and speaking of the reason for that, and that is for the people who are less fortunate than most of us in this room here, probably all of us in this room, we have set aside through a trust fund 80% of the excise tax and 100% of any application fees, registration fees, penalties, or fines that would be put aside for a pool of money that would then, and the other 20% would go to the local. This 80% would go to fund in varying proportions, and actually it's 5% what we have of that 80% that would go to dispensaries for helping the impoverished who would come into the dispensary. Then there's some other particulars to that as well. Not more than 85% would go to cover administrative costs and to our law enforcement, and so that's how.
So the dispensaries have to be licensed and the user have to be licensed?
Everyone's going to have to be licensed. The doctor's going to have to notify, if the doctor decides to recommend, remember we do not prescribe, to recommend marijuana for their patient, they will have to notify, the KBML will be in charge of looking at what doctors are recommending to certain patients, how much they're recommending. All of that will be part of a report that will be furnished to the legislators yearly by the cabinet, by the agency that dictates how many people are applying for cards, how many were rejected, how many have been approved for home grow. Everything is transparent. We're trying to be as open, as transparent, and yet be able to treat these folks who have no other remedy elsewhere. I think I addressed all your questions.
Can you talk more about the recommendation process? Why aren't there specific conditions that the doctors would be recommending?
Well, we went over that, and Representative Sims and Representative Hart went over that, at length. We ultimately, and Representative Nemes can address this as well, ultimately we believe we are not doctors. If we start listing A to F as to the conditions which could be treated by medical marijuana, then we've sort of taken on a role that we're not prepared to do. We don't have the qualification for it. We don't know how it would be beneficial. So rather than, in addition to which, if you happen to fall under category X, the next year you're going to be in saying, well, category X needs to be on this list of accepted illnesses, debilitating illnesses for which medical marijuana could be recommended. So we decided, put this in the hands of the doctors. As Representative Nemes said in the beginning, this is a doctor-patient thing. They know their patients best, and what a doctor might prescribe you for nausea might be different from what a doctor might prescribe me, because our constitutions are different. So that's why we felt it was best left in the hands of the doctors. Representative Nemes?
That's right. I think if we had a list of conditions, that would be both over-inclusive and under-inclusive. There are certain situations, certain conditions where patient A may need something and patient B may need something different. And also, we don't want to have a list that includes too many things. where a doctor would say, hold on, my patient has this condition, but they don't need access to it. And if we had that on the list, they would have access to it. And on the other side, we don't want somebody that doesn't have a condition, has a different condition, that would benefit from medical marijuana in their doctor's eyes, that wouldn't have access to it. So to make a list, which a lot of states have done, is both over-inclusive and under-inclusive. And what we've tried to do here is we've tried to make all the provisions respectful of the physician-patient relationship. And that's why we call this a trust the doctor's bill.
Does law enforcement support this bill?
Some law enforcement supports the bill, and some have questions about the bill. The governor's office is supportive of medical marijuana in general. We've not talked to them about the specific provisions of this bill, but we're hopeful that the governor's office and the Kentucky State Police, who obviously work for the governor, will be on board. But there's a number of law enforcement who supports this bill, and some who don't. I want to say this though: as I'm campaigning for office, I'm knocking on doors all over eastern Jefferson County and South Odom, and I knock on some law enforcement officers' doors, and a number of police officers say, "Jason, thank you for doing this. This is the right thing." And then over and over again, regular Kentucky citizens tell me stories about what it means for them. I walked on a door in Anchorage, and an 85-year-old man comes to the door, and he says, "Hey, aren't you the guy that's one of the guys that's pushing medical marijuana?" And I know his party registration, and he's a Republican. And I'm thinking, okay, I'm going to have to educate this fellow and defend myself. And he starts crying, and he says, "Let me tell you what this meant for my wife who passed away." And he thanked me as he was crying for what we're doing. That's what this bill is about. Kentuckians want the opportunity to help themselves when they're sick. We're going to trust the doctors to help their patients. That's what this bill's about. So law enforcement, some are for, some are against it. We're looking forward to educating a lot more.
A lot of the bigger medical groups don't let their doctors recommend medical marijuana. Will there be like pop-up doctors? And then also, how do you regulate that? Because where I'm from, you pay $20 and the doctor writes you your note to get a card. So, but I know that a lot of the mainstream doctors will not recommend medical marijuana.
Well, I've been surprised, and pleasantly so, by the number of doctors here in Kentucky and, of course, in many other states who have said, absolutely, this fills a void in what we are able to do. I mentioned earlier that the KBML would, have oversight of the doctor's portion of this, and that's very important so that it does stop what we've all, experienced in the past with the pop-up mills and all of that. If they all of a sudden see that, Dr. Smith is his client, his patients have risen. The number of patients has dramatically risen, exponentially risen. And through the reporting process, they will know that he or she has recommended to these patients marijuana for certain illnesses. They'll see a pattern, and that's what we want to know. We want to be able to know that there is a pattern or there is not a pattern. If there is a pattern, they have the opportunity to step in and look more closely at it. Obviously, at some point, the courts would be involved, or law enforcement at some point. But that's why the oversight of KBML is very important to this bill.
I want to address that question as well as I might. I agree with everything my colleague has stated. I represent doctors before the Kentucky Board of Medical Licensure regularly, and one of the things that we were very interested in is that we not set up what were known in the past as like pill mills for opioids. The Kentucky Board of Medical Licensure has really tamped down on those types of activities for doctors, and so what we wanted to do was we trust the Kentucky Board of Medical Licensure, what they've been doing. So let's go through again real quickly what's required here. If a doctor wants to recommend something for their patient, remember there has to be a physician-patient relationship. You can't just drop in and get a prescription. So if a doctor wants to recommend this for their patient, or think they might for a patient, they have to first tell the Kentucky Board of Medical Licensure, hey, I'm going to be in this market. This is something I might be doing. So the Kentucky Board of Medical Licensure knows that Dr. A is going to be doing this or might be doing this. So they're on notice. They've been notified. Then when the doctor does make the recommendation, just like they make prescriptions for opioids and other things, they have to put it into a system that the Kentucky Board of Medical Licensure and law enforcement has access to. So this is an important point. The reason we're not going to have those types of things is because the regulator of the licenses of the doctor is on notice, law enforcement is on notice, and that doctor's license is on the line. If they misbehave, they will and should lose their license.
Have you guys met with like Norton or Baptist or anything with that to talk to see if they will allow their doctors to do this?
We've met with the Hospital Association, we've met with a number of associations, and they're reviewing the bill to make sure that it would satisfy their needs. We're having those ongoing communications. As most bills are amended, House Bill 136 may be amended as we go forward on these types of questions. If a particular organization of doctors, whether that's a physician's group or whether that's a doctors that work for a hospital, decide not to make the recommendation, that's completely up to them. We're going to trust the doctors to make the decision. And so if Norton makes the decision, or if any organization makes the decision that they won't be making this kind of recommendation, that's their prerogative.
And I spoke before, hang on one sec, I spoke before the Kentucky Hospital Association a couple of months ago, I believe, on that, and, answered some of their questions, some of their concerns. Have not had any input since then, negative toward that. So I'm taking that as a good sign.
Lawrence?
As you know, some of your colleagues have said, slow down, there needs to be more research on this. Most of the evidence is anecdotal, they say. What about that argument that this is going too far too fast?
I need to address that one. That's that circular argument that drives me absolutely crazy. Marijuana is still a Scheduled 1. You cannot have, you cannot do the experiments to the degree that everyone would like. Everyone in this room would like that because of that being a Scheduled 1. Do we wait for the Scheduled 1 to be removed from Schedule 1? We all know the answer to that. How many more years will this take that people will be in pain and not have any, any relief from this? Anecdotal evidence is evidence. The double-blind placebo experiment in science is only one tool that scientists use to determine whether or not A has a result. If using A, you will have a result in B. There are causation effects, there are correlation effects, there are case studies, there are surveys of people's relief that they have. There are these anecdotal evidence. And when you have the thousands of cases that have been reported across the world, anecdotally, where this has provided relief, something is there. You cannot deny that this is providing relief. So to use that argument, to me, is very myopic.
I want to remind everyone, I don't know if you were at the Judiciary Committee during the interim, but a young lady named Cassie Everett, her husband Taylor, and their daughter came to the table, and they testified. And she's a woman who has seizures. She has a severe form of epilepsy. She's a teacher. She has a degree as a teacher, a master's degree, I believe, is required, and she was a teacher in Jefferson County Public Schools. And they decided to have a baby, and once they had the child, her seizures exacerbated, and she can no longer be a teacher. She is a teacher's assistant. She held up a bag of pills, and she takes those twice a day. She says her neurologist wants to have the option to give her medical marijuana. So she says, we want you to have this option, or recommend that you leave Kentucky. And Cassie Everett and Taylor Everett told me, they said, why would we leave Kentucky? This is our home. This is where we grew up. This is where our family is, where we want to raise our child. And so how much longer does Cassie Everett and the thousands like her have to wait? How slow must we go? It's just a delay tactic to continue to say we're not going fast enough. The overwhelming majority of states have passed this already. Canada, a number of Western European states, Israel. I mean, the verdict is in, my friend, and medical marijuana is good for people. So let's let the doctors decide.
How many years have you been trying to get medical marijuana here in?
I've only been in for 2 years, and it predates John and me.
Well, I've been in for 7, and it predates me. Senator Syme, you've probably been in here the longest.
40 years?
Senator Son, can I ask you a question real quick? Do you mind coming to the podium?
Yes.
If you would address the issue in the Senate that Chris talked about earlier, this may get through the House, but your own leadership